podcast, Picks and Perspective with Chris Johnson. Palpable paradox.
Chris, hello. How are you?
Good, Paul. Good to see you, man.
Good to see you too. What are all those cool guitars you got?
I got a couple of Kiesels. I got a lot of Kiesels, actually. I work for them on the.
Oh, right on.
So I've got a single cut kind of SCB multi-scale. That one's in drop B flat. So, and then this one, I got my Les Paul style guitar in a drop C. I actually got my Strat style looking kid right here. This one needs a string change because I've been ripping it a little hard. But,
well, I'm glad we can speak guitar language.
Yeah, please, God, yes, that's what's up. And thank you so much for taking the time to hang out with me and talk about guitar stuff. We met briefly, maybe like once or twice at the Dunlop booth when I was back kind of working full time for Dunlop.
Oh, right on.
And you were super sweet to me, and I was always been like, oh man, if I ever get a chance to talk to Paul, that's the guy.
At last, without all the chaos of NAMM going on around us.
Yeah, that was exactly what it is. And I always hate even saying, hey, I'm so-and-so. And you're like, I know, I got to go. Thank you. All right, goodbye. It's one of those moves. But man, you've got like a couple lifetimes worth of guitars behind you.
Well, you know, I've got to have one for every hat.
And how many hats are there?
Well, I just got some shelves put in. I don't
really.
Oh, it's right out of range. But the I don't know how. I have more guitars than hats, but I'll have to get more hats.
Hey, that's a good reason to get more hats. That's right. Well, man, I know you got a new record, right? Like, so this Christmas album called "'Twas." Is that correct?
Correct, yeah.
Like "'Twas the Night," type of thing. I've been listening to some of the tracks of that. You really make Christmas music really listenable for a guitar guy. Thank you.
Right on. Well, that's the goal.
Yeah, I was like, oh, Christmas. Well, that's Paul Gilbert. It should be all right, And then like I was, no, this is actually really good. I really enjoyed. Like, you really throw down on this album, so it's not like you just like a melancholy rendition of these classics.
I did make a minor key version of Frosty. I'm going there. Was it the? So that but that doesn't last. Then it goes back to major, and it's in 7/8, and so. But mostly the goal was to make it where I liked it, and I've gone through periods of my life where I really didn't like Christmas music, where I was like, enough of this. I do not want to hear this again, and so that was kind of the challenge: was how do I rekindle liking these songs and maybe even like them more than I ever did. A lot of that had to do with research and just finding, other people that have recorded them and getting into that. And man, like finding those old Nat King Cole versions. Of course, he's a great singer, but the orchestration behind him, full choir and orchestra, a million different instruments, and whoever was arranging, they knew their way around a chord. And it was a good thing I hired a couple jazz guys to play in the band, because I would invite them over and play them that stuff and say, can you guys write a chart? Because I might be, I'm not totally dumb, I could figure out some of the chords, but it would take me a long time. It would be 2 days, which actually, if I had the time, would be a lot of. I would like to do. I'm curious. I love to learn, but I had a deadline. Like the record company told me, like, we need this in July or August at the latest, and it was already June, and I'm like, man, I don't have time to learn a new skill. And then I got to get this done. I got to learn my part too. I got to learn to play the melody. So it was good. I had some professionals in the band, to sort out the chords and figure out the arrangements, and it was cool. Probably the only album I've ever done that involved charts.
Wow, because you don't mess with that. You just go. When you write, and you kind of like take your own notes. And
well, and with rock and roll and pop music, it's sort of built to be memorized, and I'm dealing with with a language where I have some fluency. You know, if I'm using the chords that I learned from an AC/DC song to build my own song, I know those chords. You know, I don't need a chart to read D5. You know, I know. Sure. I could find that one. But if you know, if it's got all these wild chords going on, you know, I might need some assistance. So, but some of it I did do myself, like the opening track, which is "Let It Snow." You know, if you just do that, you know, like let's sort of as it comes out of the box. Was it? I've got my version in my head, but was it? If you're the weather outside is frightful, and the time's on you could get it done with, you know, a 1 and a 5 and a 2, but I started off on the 4 chord. The weather outside is frightful. Change the bass note, so it's sort of a sus 4. Then I hit a, which is really kind of a D6 or a D6 9. C sharp. It's a B over C sharp, which is the chord of the 70s. Yacht rock chord. Then a F augmented. Since there's no place to go. F sharp minor 11. Then I keep the chord the same, but put a C in the bass, which is a tritone. And then a D sharp minor 11. Let it snow. And then resolve with a straight E major. So that took me a while. But the fire is so delightful. And since we know place to go, let it snow, let it snow, let it snow. And then modulate G and so that's you know, for that I wrote out a chart for the guys, which was kind of like, I felt like a real musician. Yeah, look, here's my chart, guys. You know, of course they always have to fix it because I don't know how to write codas or second endings or, you know, I'm really.
Hey man, that's why they get paid. That's why they get paid, right?
But the chords
they get paid. Yeah, the chords are there. That's good. I love it, man. That's real. It's cool to hear you, you know, kind of, you know, wanting to do this project and kind of like recognizing, the futility of like trying to figure it all out yourself, and then and enlisting the right characters to come in and, hey, listen to this Nat King Cole. This is the vibe, but we're also going to take it to a different place. You know, that's like always, I mean, that's something that I imagine about you. Always kind of like stretching and kind of trying to find a different way to expand your horizon. And this album seems to be doing that, you know, in a kind of a different way.
Well, it's nice to talk about it on the other side of it now that it's done, because at the beginning it's somewhat terrifying, you know, because you're sort of, you know, you're at the bottom of the mountain looking up at it going like, I don't know if I could do this, you know, like, you know, a lot of it. And I thought, man, I need help, you know, I can't do this alone. You know, I need my, probably a bad analogy. I need my Sherpas. To get to the top. Carry my equipment up the mountain, because, you know, and really be the guide, because, you know, I can't make it up myself. And you know, I get to sit in the lead chair because I'm playing the melody. But in a way, that's like the simplest role, you know, because what's going on in the harmony and a lot of the arrangements, and you know, so I'm really reliant on the team for this stuff. And again, maybe I could have done it myself, but it would have just taken so long that it would have fallen flat. So I really, you know, have gratitude for the efforts and abilities of the other guys in the band.
100%. Yeah, 100%. That's so cool. I appreciate you, like I said, putting out a seasonal record that I feel like I can listen to. I know that other guitarists have done it and stuff too, but like, I'm not really a fan of Christmas music. It's just kind of, it's like one of those things where you're like, oh, I know those songs, and some of the arrangements are cool. Some of them are, you know, just like they bore you to death, but like, but you've made it interesting in a lot of different ways with your different chordal, you know, change ups and kind of jazzing it out. And so I look forward to the release of, when does it drop now? Is it?
I think it might be like the day after Thanksgiving or something, like November 26th, or which actually, yeah, coming up pretty soon. And then it takes a little while for the vinyl, because you know, you have to wait, you have to get in line at the factory because
Mhm.
vinyl's popular now. That's it. So that was, I think that's why the record company was on me, on my case to get it done quick, because they're like, man, if we need vinyl by Christmas, we need it, mid-August at the latest. So I was really, we recorded the whole thing in 6 days, and we did 2 songs a day with hardly any rehearsal, and the
Wow.
the arrangements are pretty deep. So it was, I remember every day I'd get up and I planned out the whole thing in advance. It's like, okay, we're going to record these 2 songs this day, had the whole thing planned. And every single day I'd get up and go like, I don't know if this is going to work. Like, this is, that looks hard. Like, are we really going to make it through those 2 today? Like, we haven't rehearsed them. I don't even, I don't even know what I'm going to do in this part yet, but that's the power of having 5 brains.
Mm-hmm.
I'm when it's not just me. I'm not, I if it was, I couldn't do it by myself. I couldn't get that done in 2 songs a day. But you get a good team together, everybody, everybody's got a common goal, and you get it. It's amazing what you can get done.
Yeah, that's great. Well, and this is a contrast in a way, right? Because I believe, wasn't the last record, Werewolves of Portland, wasn't that kind of all you?
That was, well, I had an engineer, and that was important, to have at least somebody, to bounce ideas off of, and to sort of have a human presence, to communicate with. But yeah, that was, I played all the instruments, and I mean, actually, the thing that was not so nice about that was it rekindled my love of drumming, and I've got a kit over here now. I play every day, and I'm doing a lot of recordings where I play all the instruments, because actually this album rekindled my sort of fluency with Pro Tools, because although we would get the 2 songs in a day, we wouldn't necessarily get full takes. So I'd go home, and then the next morning I'd get up at 5 a.m. and edit and do the edits. And from doing that, I got a lot more quick with Pro Tools. So
Sure.
now in my home studio, I'll go like, okay, I got an hour. Can I do a song playing every instrument in an hour and mix it? And that means, like, no fixes, everything's one take. And a lot of times it's just a jam. Just go, okay, just lay down a groove. I don't even have an arrangement. It's in C, and then I'll jam in C, play bass, and it actually turns out to be something that's really listenable. At least for me. A lot of times I don't listen to my own stuff, but these jams I've been doing, I've been listening to a lot. So maybe that'd be the next thing. I'll also apologize for not having song forms.
just a jam album where you did everything like that form.
But
you talking about?
I have to say, I have been doing, with these new things I've been doing. I did do a cover of Wang Dang Sweet Poon Tang, doing all Ted's vocal lines on guitar, and I just did 10,000 Lovers by TNT.
Ooh, cool. Cool tracks to choose. So that's a great format too, because I think there's a certain kind of energy each time we kind of go into our creative space without a lot of expectation, and we're not hanging on like, oh, I got to get this thing done. You just kind of like sit in the vibe, and you're like, oh, well, this drum beat is calling to me.
Yeah.
Oh, well, we'll see what bass wants to go on that, and we'll see what the layers just kind of happen to be, versus having that kind of rigid like mindset around, nope, it's got to get this, got to get that, and then you come up with stuff that's kind of unexpected, I'd imagine. It
ends up being very honest and very listenable, because you're playing very naturally. You're only using the tools that work really well, because if you go to a place where you're not so confident, you're probably gonna screw it up and need to fix it, and there's not time for that. But anyway, I think a lot of these jams I'm doing these days are usually what I do is a response to what I just did, and I sort of fluctuate that way. So like you said, I did an album where I played everything. Then I really wanted to do an album with a band, and now that I just did an album with a band, it's like, oh, I kind of want to play everything myself again. So it's this back and forth that I find myself. That's been a habit. Where okay, I did Mr. Big, let's get Racer X back together. It's nice, it's wonderful to have the luxury to do that, because some musicians, I love Angus Young, and as a fan, I'm happy that he only does AC/DC, but it would be sometimes I would think he'd be backstage going like, man, I really feel like long pants tonight.
You think after all these years, you know?
Yeah, like wouldn't it could just you know, then the short pants, I'll be looking forward to those more after that, you know.
Yeah, so I just really now I have that in my mind. I really want to see. I want Angus to like break the internet by showing up with pants.
Yeah.
Anytime. Come on, buddy.
Yeah.
If you're out there listening, let's see those pants just once or twice.
Long pants and a strat. Yeah.
Yeah, pants and a strat. Yeah, that'll break us all. What kind of drum kit are you using there? What did you pick out for yourself?
Well, I bought I bought it for the video because I made a video for the Werewolves of Portland, the song, and it was a performance video. I mean, I'm wearing a wolf mask, but it's basically a performance video where I'm playing guitar, playing drums, and I didn't want to spend a lot of money because I thought like I don't know if I'm even going to use it, so I'm just buying it for the video. So I bought this like a Pearl, I think it's called Roadshow,
okay.
and it's it's for kids. It's like an 18-inch kick drum. 10-inch tom-tom. It's tiny. It's got one cymbal, one hi-hat, and I'm 6'3", so me, big old me playing this tiny little kit, which is great. You can get around it. It's so easy to play, and I put those like the quiet heads on it, the mesh heads. I think they're called Silent Stroke. Remo makes them, and I got some Zildjian L80 cymbals, which are the ones with all the holes in them. So it's quiet, but I mic'd it up. And I got those Steven Slate samples, which are plug-in on Pro Tools. So even though actually it sounds pretty good even as it is, but I hit the snare, which is like okay. I put the sample on, it's like Def Leppard, and
nice.
And actually I don't need to go all the way to Def Leppard. I probably do more of the just the hair of a little bit of John Bonham, and I'm good. But it sounds killer, and also that because they're the Silent Stroke heads, they're different than a regular drum head, and they're bouncy. So I've never been able to do double strokes. I know what they are. I know technically how to do them. I understand them, but physically I never put in the practice to really get a double stroke together. But with the bouncy heads, I could do double strokes.
Wow.
And I could get all the and all this stuff I could never do, and so it's such a blast, because I could do like kind of like sophisticated fills. Before I could only do the caveman fills, and I kind of those are usually the best choice anyway. But it's nice to have some double strokes in it.
That's so cool, man, and I love that you're reconnecting with drums. I mean, that's something that probably my second favorite instrument is drums, really, because it just feels it's like such a kinesthetic thing, and to move your limbs in a bigger way and like have each part of your body be kind of chunking out one piece of this rhythm that it's a little dance that you're doing, and there's something just like that lights my brain up around that. And so I can imagine it for you kind of reconnecting after all these musical years, and then being able to go, oh wow, I'm kind of a drummer. All right, I'm gonna do this.
And there's no wrong notes.
Amen.
With guitar, especially doing what I'm doing lately with playing melodies. I mean, playing a melody is like shark infested waters of music, because one wrong note and it's really obvious. If you go, what was the one like that one doesn't fit with the others, which but if you hit this tom or that tom, it's not a big deal. So that element of clam potential, and having to be cautious because of that, and having to like really concentrate to make sure you get the right notes is with that being gone, it's such a liberating experience. Like all I got to do is get the dynamics, and you also don't have to worry about ending, because you hit it, and you don't really have any control of how long it lasts. It is what it is. With guitar, you can do that, or you can go, and then actually that I love that. I mean, that's such an expressive tool to deal with long and short. And long and short sounds like something that's so simple it's boring, but long and short creates such, I mean, that's something that almost every student needs work on, maybe including me, to be able to just balance that, you know, that was, you know, short, long, and to have the short really be played with intention and a nice tone, and that's how you create shuffles, you know, the little ghost notes that go in the middle, and they're short, they're quiet, and right next to a big loud long one, and that's and of course, you know, you get a shuffle groove on the drums, but you're really only dealing with attacks. You're not dealing with having to, I mean, I suppose you can catch a cymbal, maybe that's the thing, but with guitar it's a much bigger issue.
Yeah, that's a really good point too. I mean, I do notice that, like in younger, even, I mean, intermediate players, lots of players deal with the dynamic of the long short in a kind of funky way at times. And that short is probably more important than the long. The long is a little easier. You can hold on to it and just kind of like sort your vibrato out if that's needed. But the kind of the nuance of the short is kind of what I hear you speaking to there. Like, it doesn't mean that it's like to be disregarded and it's just like, it's like there's still a very kind of, you know, poignant thing you have to get when you're attacking that and alternating.
Well, short is dangerous too, because if you're loud and distorted and your guitar is all the way up and you stop playing, it's not going to be quiet. It's going to go, you know, and string noise, and, you know, there's all kinds of stuff that can really sound bad if you stop. And so, you know, it's one thing just getting used to the gear, you know, just getting like right at that level where you're, I mean, you know, of course now I'm not on a stage competing with the volume of a drummer, so I'm not loud in the room, so, you know, I can turn up, it's not a big deal. But live, it's just really an issue, and that's how I learned to play. I when I was a teenager, always in bands with loud drummers, so you get fast with your volume control. So if you want a short note, you know, you got to get your volume at the end of it, you know, and that's how you can always spot the bedroom players. You know, they've got their volume on the whole time and they do this, and it's like, you haven't played with the drummer much, have you? You know, because
yeah, that's like, when that's what, when you started out and learned to play, like it was long before the Rocktron Hush and before all these noise gate like things that can come in and kind of help you control your live sound. Do you use any of that stuff these days, or? Well, no. I mean, now I turn the pedal off and turn the volume down. But I had a Rocktron Hush in the early days of Racer X, but that was because I was using the amp for everything in those days. So, you know, there was no channel switching or anything, and so we were on 11 all the time with the distortion, which has some hiss to it. You know, it's a fairly hissy sound, and the hiss was annoying. So you'd put the hush on to get rid of the hiss. And when you stop playing, and I still, you know, use the volume to turn down to when I'm not playing, but now to get rid of the hiss, I usually have like 2 or sometimes even 3 distortion pedals, and if I want maximum distortion, they're all on, and as soon as the song's over, you just hit it off, and then, you know, the hiss goes away because you're suddenly, you know, on a clean sound. Yeah, but so, I mean, that approach in the beginning is still with you, essentially. You turn things down and you're still like very cognizant of it. Whereas, I mean, I have a fractal, and a lot of these kids these days, you know, they run around and they've got like super tight gates on their patches. So if they stopped and kind of stopped playing, the guitar would almost clam up, you know? And so like, there's a different thing that's out there as well, as far as technology is concerned, right? So not that everybody's using it, but it is available. You know, and it's one of the ways we can move through.
If you're playing music where you want those tight, you know, like 0 to 100, back and forth a lot. That kind of rig would be great for that. But I think also the thing I like, you know, if that's your range, 0 to 100, I also want to have the ability to be on 8. You know, where you can. You clean it up with your volumes on 2, and you're able to get some clean stuff, and your gate's not, you know, going in and out because it doesn't know what, doesn't understand that. It's getting you confused with the hiss. You know, you can't differentiate between you know, some quiet playing and some hiss, because it can't. You know, that's the thing with noise gates.
Yeah, so you're a very dynamic player anyway, so you definitely want something in between, you know, 1 in a million, right? So like there's that little spot that you're speaking about. This kind of a sweet spot that that's not too crazy, and you can still like control it pretty well, you know.
I almost think of it like with cars, like people that are like professional drivers don't want an automatic transmission.
Yeah,
you know, like a pro driver wants a stick shift because they want to be really in control of it, you know. And but me, I don't want that. You know, I'm not a pro driver. You know, I want it automatic. You know, because I'm not racing. You know, I'm just going to the, you know, the guitar repair shop, pick up a refret. You know, and so, you know, so for your hobbyist or something, maybe it's okay, but you know, this is my life's work. So, you know, I don't mind working a little bit with the volume control to get that extra control over dynamics and tone.
And can you speak a little bit to this, your Fireman guitar that you're holding right there? Because that I'm curious around, I can't remember when it was introduced, but like, did you have them flip the Iceman guitar to for better balance with that lower horn being the upper horn? Is that something that you had in mind, or is it just to do something cool?
I designed it almost as a prank. Because I've worked with Ibanez forever, and I've always been on great terms with the guys. But I had designed a guitar. It was, you know, when the millennium changed, it was the year 2000, and I asked them to make me a 2000 guitar. So the body was in the shape of the number 2000. It was a light show guitar. It had a big battery pack, and you know, it had lights installed, and it was ridiculous. It was a ridiculous instrument, you know, just for this big show I was doing at the Tokyo Dome. And after that, right, I called him up and, you know, to ask for some other instrument. Before I could get a word in, the guy, my friend at Ibanez, was like, "Can you just do a normal shape instead of, you know, one of those 2000s?" And I could tell he was kind of exasperated from having, you know, dealt with that instrument. And so I was like, let me call you back. And somehow having that limitation, because I don't even remember what I was going to have made, but just the idea of like, okay, I've got to keep it within these bounds. I thought, okay, well, how can I stretch? How can I mess with that? You know, what can I do to you know, to like tweak the rules a little bit? And so I always loved the Iceman, and I thought, well, what? And I just got in Photoshop, so I put an Iceman in Photoshop, and of course, in Photoshop, it's easy to flip something upside down. And then you know, it needed a cutaway if you're going to play it like this, and that was kind of all I did. You know, I mean, the original one was real plain and simple. I hadn't figured out a pick guard yet, and I sent it to them, and they did it. I was kind of surprised. I thought he'd be, oh no, really, you know. But they were cool. You know, they made it for me, and I was surprised. I mean, well, first of all, they're real guitar makers, so they did things that I wouldn't have thought of. Like, they put a contour in so it's comfortable.
Sure.
And you know, made a good neck joint. And I said the one other thing that I didn't really put much thought into it, but it ended up being a really good choice, was they said, well, what's the neck? You know, do you want it to be, you know, what scale, what shape? And at the time, I've always been a big Pat Travers fan. And I had a Gibson Melody Maker that I bought because that's what Pat used to play. And I said, well, I'm kind of digging this Melody Maker. Can you make it kind of like a Melody Maker neck? And that's the typical like baseball bat, you know, really thick neck, but it's also the Gibson scale, so it's a little bit shorter than a Strat, or like the, you know, typical Ibanez like RG or PGM, the ones that I had. So I didn't even know about scale length. You know, it was just something I never pay attention to. And you know, I'm not a tech. You know, I don't know about radiuses and all that stuff, or you know, just sort of like, I was just like, man, this Pat Travers guitar feels cool, you know, and it sounds good. So how about one of those? And so they did that. It was a really thick neck, and I tried it. It was like, man, this thing's just a tone machine. You know, it just resonates really well. Sounds great. And that turned out to be the magic of it, was that. And it's really different. A lot of the Ibanez have really thin necks and are more, you know, wide rather than deep. And so it's sort of it's different than a lot of what Ibanez does. You know, it's more like an old vintage Gibson, you know, with a screwy looking, you know, Ibanez body, but it does balance really well, having the long horn on top. You know, when you stand up with it, it feels good.
I figured it would.
You know, it's good for, you know, it feels comfortable sitting down too. And yeah, it turned out to be a really good musical instrument. Is as much as an odd looking instrument, you know, functionally it's wonderful.
It's my favorite one that you have, though. I like all your guitars, but I just, when I see that, and that one in particular that you're holding with the little slide thing that you have going on.
I had a magnet installed under the pickguard. It holds the slide in place.
Brilliant.
Yeah,
it's brilliant.
And
I love that.
It's funny because when I give this to any guitar player for the first time, you know, somebody backstage is like, oh, check this out. They always grab it with their right hand. Because, you know, people are right-handed, so that, you know,
Sure.
when you reach for something, you tend to do it. But it's built for the left hand, you know, because when you're playing, so that being able to go back and forth like that.
Oh man, that's like the coolest thing I've ever seen. And you made it like I never knew. I mean, you never, if you weren't looking, you wouldn't know that you're like switching that quickly.
Like two different guitar players trading off with each other.
That's it.
One less person to pay salary to.
Yeah, more money in the pocket. Yeah, so what's cool, I think, is that lower horn, because it's like so diminutive that it looks like it works perfectly for the left hand to kind of just sneak up onto it. If it were like a regular horn, it might not work.
Well, I've put it on just about every guitar, and I was concerned about that because I thought, like, what about an SG or, you know, something that's where it's like, not because this is flat, you know, so it's a nice surface to work with. Where an SG is, you know, kind of curved, but you can do it. Like I ordered all these different shaped magnets, and initially it's nice to get a strong one because it does take some practice, you know, with that on and off thing. It's you know, you have to build that into a habit, and you know, if you're not used to it, you tend to drop the slide on the floor a lot.
Sure.
And the stronger the magnet is, the less likely that's going to happen. But now that I'm better at it, it's more of a habit. You know, I don't need the magnet to be as strong, and then it can be thinner, it can be shorter, and that way you can get it on to just about any guitar. And you can use, you know, this is the stuff you get, this 3M it's like mounting tape, you know, so it's foamy, and you know, it looks like that, and then you wrap you get a slide, like let me get one. Done. So this is about as small as I would go. That's like an inch and a half, I think, or it might inch and a half or an inch. And it's a neodymium N52, which is the rating. That's really powerful. Okay. And you be careful with these, you know. It's a quarter inch wide and an eighth inch deep, and then you wrap gaffer tape around it because these will shatter. And when they shatter, they're really sharp. They're dangerous. So you wrap it in gaffer tape. I just so happen to have one ready to go.
Oh, nice.
I did sort of a sloppy job with this gaffer tape. You do it, you know, do a nice job. Cut up a piece of this and then stick it on the lower horn, and you're good. And if you screw up, like if you don't like where it is, the tape won't hurt your guitar. You just got like a plastic. This is something. What is it? A spreader? It's like a spreader for grout or something. It's a plastic thing, and you can use that to get it off, and it won't scratch your finish.
Nice.
So you can keep trying until you get it right. That's the secret.
That's cool. That is so cool, man. I'm so hyped on that.
These are dangerous, so I got to keep them on my safe spot.
Yeah, definitely. And thank you for
it's funny,
showing
though,
us.
the question everybody asks is like, does it affect the neck pickup? It's like because it's a strong magnet, does it somehow affect the sound? It doesn't, because it's not close enough. But the lesson I learned the hard way, if you have a strong magnet, don't put it on your pickup, because it'll flip the polarity.
Oh, so it'll mess your pickup completely up.
Yeah, your guitar will be out of phase with itself, which I found it the hard way. I mean, I was the reason I did it was I had a guitar and I had lowered the pickup too far, and it dropped in. It came out at the spring, the screw came out, and I was like, man, I got to unscrew the whole pick guard to put it back on. And I thought, well, I got a strong magnet. Maybe I could just put a magnet and pull it up. Dumbest thing, because I put the magnet on it, which is directly on the pickup, and it I don't know, demagnetize is the right word. It did what I said. It flipped the polarity, because I played the guitar again, and of course it sounds fine until you have both pickups on. But I did. It was like, man, it sounds kind of weird. I mean, actually, it's kind of cool if you like that kind of thing. But it's I kind of wanted to do it on purpose rather than by accident.
Well, we'll stay away from that, because especially if you're buying really nice pickups or have aftermarket pickups, that's even extra bummer, because some people pay $200-$300 for an extra set, and then replace that with.
As long as you don't stick it right on there, put it on the guitar, not the pickup.
Well, thanks for the insight on that. That's super cool. I might actually try to put that on my Strat and see if I can figure that out. Like, that might be an interesting little addition.
Yeah, it should work great on a Strat or a Tele. It's flat, and if you want to get tricky, you have your luthier, route out, because that's the thing. With this one, I had my tech repair guy, route out a hole and glue in a magnet, and then the pickguard, so it looks slick that way.
Yeah. Do you have one of those guitars that right there where it's like where the pickguard is split, so the thing sits in there a little better? Or
the early ones that we did, we weren't really sure what was going to happen. We didn't know whether it was going to sort of slide around or so. The first one we had a little route, so instead it turns out like the magnet's pretty strong, so you can move it. It won't it'll return to where it is. You don't need to put you don't need to put a cavity.
That's cool. And those 3 mini hums, did you design those with DiMarzio, with Larry over there, or?
Oh yeah, there's these are all DiMarzios. The middle one is like super powerful, because I always lower it down, because that's where I pick. So I can never have a pickup that's like right up near the strings in the middle. And you lose a lot of output. So the middle ones is I think they're PG-13 is the model, and the middle ones the middle one's really powerful, because it compensates for that.
Okay, yeah. I had a set of your single coils. Larry had sent me over in a different Strat. It's not here right now, but they're some of my favorite single coils ever. Like I forget what the name of them were, but they're your single coil Paul Gilbert series. Maybe you have multiple, but I remember like telling a bunch of people, I'm like, dude, if you're gonna get single coils, get those DiMarzios, because those are super sick. Paul Gilbert's, man, he knows what he's talking about. That's nice.
Thank you.
Yeah. So really, I don't know, whatever you had them do, like there's something about it feels like a real cool, modern, clean single coil tone that has like a real, like, just perfect amount of rasp, which, like, when I think about your playing and your tone, it makes all the sense in the world. But like, I wasn't ready for it. Just kind of like, it took the old school pickups that were in there and just kind of, it made them sound like they were dead, like these came in and breathed life into this guitar that I hadn't even played in a long time. So just a plug for your single coil pickups and for DiMarzio in general. Oh, great company.
Well, to me, one of the I would say the 2 tricks of tone are, one, high action, because then you can beat away at the guitar and it's not going to buzz. And that's that's the thing I see with a lot of my students is this carefulness. And if you're starting out, of course you have to be careful, but sure. If that's what I loved about like Hendrix, Stevie Ray Vaughan, and players that you can really strum a solo. really like get your whole body, and that's really different than, you know, there's this carefulness or so the when you put that much force into playing, if your guitar's set up to be just so low action, you're gonna get buzz, and it's gonna sort of fret out. So I tend to use really high action, which also benefits slide, because slide sounds better with with high action, because that's not going to work with low action. But I also use eights, and that because you know, if you have high action, it's hard to play because you got to press down a lot. And so for me to do it like the sort of legato, you know, or have like a lot of, you know, strong pull-offs, that's you know, that's low action is nice for pull-offs. You know, a player like Alan Holdsworth, who probably had really low action, he's not like a banger, so it's okay. Yeah, so that's the guitar part. And then for the amp part, being near to your speaker. And when I did the Christmas album, I rigged up a thing. I took a pig nose, which is a little amp, like a 5-inch speaker in it, and I drilled some holes in the bottom of it and used that to mount it on a guitar stand. So, you know, a guitar stand's got those two little hooks that come out on the top that hold the guitar neck, and I just, you know, clamped it onto there, so the speaker's facing kind of toward the ground, and I put it right next to my guitar, and that way, it, you know, it's not loud in the room because the amp's so little it can't be loud, but the proximity is still moving air near my instrument, so I can get like feedback and sustain without having to rely on just, you know, gain from the distortion pedals. And that's the nice thing about gain is, you know, you hit a note and it keeps going. You're trying to get sustain, but you can get that with feedback. I mean, it's, you know, it's not the typical like kind of, you know, annoying feedback, but just where the note keeps going because it's gently, you know, coming out of the speaker that's hitting the string, and it's just gives you a real nice sustain. And that way, I don't have to rely on like, you know, the typical just lots and lots of distortion, but I can get the feel I want and have it, you know, it's kind of magic. But that's, you know, that's the way people used to do it, you know, with a 100-watt Marshall in the room. But if I do that, I'm not gonna be able to fix any mistakes because it's gonna leak through the drum mics.
So you're using that pig nose kind of like as well as like your other amp in another room, like controlled sound over there, or you're only using the pig nose? Well,
kind of. I think I had the pig nose on one channel, and then the other channel was I got this little Marshall right here. It's a SV20 or SV20C because it's combo. It's got a 10-inch speaker in it. Yeah. And that was actually still in the same room, but just, you know, relatively, you know, loud enough where the drums aren't leaking into it, but quiet enough where it's not leaking into the drums. But I wanted to have the Marshall because it's, you know, doing a whole album with a 5-inch speaker it's asking a little much of this. That's a lot of responsibility for a 5-inch speaker. So, you know, the 10-inch could be a little more. If I need some bottom end, it's there, and it's, you know, a little more. You know, it's not gonna get weird. You know, that's reliable tone to have.
That's awesome, man. That's a cool little hack there. I hadn't even thought about, but like, yeah, creating more resonance in your near field while you're playing also probably helps just a little more of, you know, just like when you're on stage and you can feel the air move from your rig, that like you get this tactile response, like your body feels it a little bit more. And even if it's just your hands a little bit that are able to hear that and feel that in the room, then it probably helps the overall like sensation of playing, I imagine.
Well, I think partially because of my hearing loss, that's a big deal. Being able to feel air move, you know, that's things that aren't my ears still perceiving the sound. You know, and I think anybody who plays an acoustic instrument, that's a big part of it. You know, if you're a clarinet player, you know, you're feeling this thing vibrate on your mouth. You know, it's your whole face is moving. And if you're, you know, acoustic piano player, your hand is connected to this giant piece of wood and metal that's vibrating. And I know, like my wife plays acoustic piano. Whenever she has to play, like an electronic keyboard, it's always, she's always a little disappointed. Like I'm not moving the air like that big thing. That's a wonderful part of playing music is moving the air or moving the instrument itself. And electric guitar tends to be, unamplified. It's a pretty plinky, which it is on purpose because they're trying not to feed back. If you ever try to play like a full hollow body guitar through an amp, it's a monster. You listen to old Ted Nugent things, like, man, how did he do that?
Yeah.
Because as soon as I've done that once in a while, I think, oh, wouldn't it be fun to take a hollow body on stage? And it's like, woo, it's impossible.
Oh man. So I want to shift and I want to ask you about guitar picks a bit because for a few reasons. I love kind of documenting players' pick history. So I'm interested in like, what do you remember about your early days of getting a guitar pick? Was there anybody that inspired you? Like you had guitar lessons from an uncle or a brother or a cousin or something? And how did you get to play what you play now? And I'd love to hear a little bit about like your inspiration around the drill and like all that stuff as you kind of got down the road.
Well, the first pick I ever had was the tail wing of a model airplane.
Oh,
because it was kind of the right size and shape, and I didn't have a pick. We had a guitar laying around the house, but there was no pick. I hadn't taken lessons for 3 years. I took lessons when I was 6, and I started trying to play again when I was 9. So 3 years had gone by. I don't know where my pick was. Long lost. So I was like, man, what can I use? And so I had a little model airplane. I thought, oh, the tail wing could work. So I broke that off, and real early on, I had what was ever at the music store. It was probably like a Fender Medium or something, and those would wear out pretty quick. And then the ones that I remember that wouldn't wear out were like what was it, a Herco or something. It was this nylon thing that had it was real bumpy. It had a lot of little bumps on it.
Herco's one of those. Yeah,
I think it was Herco. I can't remember. I remember they were nylon. And I had a weird way of holding the pick back then. I kind of call it the emu, where I held it with 2 fingers and the thumb, and actually I still do that a lot, but not as radically, because I got to the point where I was holding it back, almost like you see Marty Friedman or Neil Schon.
Mm-hmm.
They kind of play like that, where it's this underneath thing, and that's what I developed. That seemed to work pretty well with that Herco pick. Again, I don't remember if that's exactly what it was, but the nylon pick. So I used that for a while, and then I think somebody gave me an Yngwie pick, because I knew some people that knew him, and he was using like a 1.5. I mean, or it might have been, or maybe I read it. He had like a Fender Extra Heavy, I think.
Yep.
And so I tried those, and that was around the time when I started to hold the pick differently. I was starting to angle it forward, so my thumb was more like that instead of being like that. And I was copying. I was like, and really everybody, like when I went to GIT, suddenly I was in a building with 300 guitar players, and I'm like, man, everybody's holding it like this, and I'm the oddball holding it backwards. And arguably, that was like the peak of my, if you listen to what I played on the first Racer X album, I could pick pretty well like that. I got the job done, but it was starting to hurt, because it was like pushing my thumb backwards. And I thought, well, let me just explore what everybody else is doing. And like Yngwie's playing like that. He sounds great. So I started doing that with the Extra Heavy. And again, I would just run out of them. And I think I found somebody at a music store who said like, I'll make picks for you, and we'll even like, write your name on them. And those, I don't know where they came from, but they had a little beveled edge, which I don't know if I even necessarily liked, but they were free. He would just make them for, and I think he put the name of his music store on the other side or something. Sure. And so I sort of got used to those just because they're real slippery, which was, but I used those for a brief time. And then I did a Racer X album, and John Alderetti, who's changed the name to Juan Alderetti,
I love Juan.
bass player of Racer X. he showed up at the session for Racer X with a big box of Tortex. And
my man,
because I think he knew some people at Dunlop, and so it had every color, you know, and every color is different thickness. So the purple ones were the thickest, and it went all the way down to the red ones, which were the thinnest. And so the purple ones were similar to the, you know, in thickness to the Fenders, but they wouldn't wear out. Like the Fenders were cool, but you know, after a couple songs, they weren't the same. You know, it'd be like, well, it's that I need a new one, and I can't afford if you change the pick every 2 songs. so the you know, the Tortex would last longer, but eventually I did go through all the purple ones. So I was out of purple, and rather than call up, you know, Dunlop, you know, I just felt like, I don't want to bother anybody. So I thought, well, the blue ones are close. You know, they're almost as thick. So I started using the blue ones, and I got used to them real quick. I'm like, oh, these blue ones are cool. Maybe I like those better. You know, so you know, use those, and then, you know, and then again, it takes like 6 months to use them all up, and then, you know, I had to move on to the green because they're out of blues, and I kept moving down, and finally only had the red ones left. And my first thought was like, well, the reds are really good for acoustic because they're good for strumming. Like, because they don't catch on the string. They, you know, they sort of glide through. If I'm playing, you know, my Beatles, you know, if I'm doing like, you know, was it what was, I can't remember the F sharp. They close your eyes and I'll kiss you. I gotta remember the chord. The F sharp. And then, yeah, B7. You, whatever that is. I'm normally I get the chords right, but a lot of strumming in that one. And if I played a heavy pick, it would get all tangled up. You know, it'd be like, you know, it wasn't graceful. Where the thin one would just glide over, and I could strum anything. And at the same time, you know, I've always been into that like kind of Hendrix, Stevie Ray Vaughan strumming thing. You can hear Hendrix doing it on Killing Floor. Like he opened up the Monterey Pop Festival with that. And you know, he's strumming, but getting single notes to come out because his left hand technique is so advanced. He's able to mute all the stuff, and it's such high energy and so cool. And I found with the thin pick that worked really well because it's still, basically it's still strumming. And then the thin pick, just the killing pick scratches. And then the other thing in this with the thin one, I was given a lesson, and I was trying to get my student to get some pick harmonics. And I've got this one exercise that I show everybody where you just get like kind of slow 16th notes on the open A string, like just, you know, alternate picking it down, up, and you mute it, and you get it real even, and then on purpose you start throwing in pick harmonics, and so maybe just do it on the downbeat, like, and then you start doing rhythms like. And you're able to, you know, get these really 2 different tones just with your hand. And so I showed that to the student, and he tried it, and it did not work. Like the harmonics weren't coming out. But I was watching him, and I'm like, man, you're doing it right. You know, your technique looks perfect. I don't know what's wrong. And it's like, it should be working. And I said, wait a minute. I said, here, use my pick, and then give me yours. And he had like a 2 millimeter, you know, really thick pick. And I tried his, and it sounded like this. You could not get the pick harmonic. You know, you could use the best technique in the world, and it just, you know, that pick wasn't gonna work for that sound. And then he tried mine. It instantly sounded perfect. And so I started to realize that the tones that you can get from a thin pick, especially like on the rap strings, you just have a wider palette of tones, and like the Michael Schenker kind of. Intro, he does a rock bottom. I mean, I don't know what kind of pick he uses, but that's, those tones are really good. And then somebody told me that Ted Nugent used a thin pick, and I thought, man, his tone that he gets on Great White Buffalo, that real chunky, that is so ferocious, and I've never been able to get that. And I thought, maybe if I have a thin pick, I'll be able to get that Ted Nugent tone. So that's my still a mountain I've yet to climb, but I'm getting one step closer with my 0.50s.
You're exclusively on 0.50s now?
I've been using 0.50 for, I don't know, probably 5 years or so. And wow. It was gradual. I mean, I used like 0.73 for a couple of years, and then one day I was just like, it was because of Ted Nugent. I was like, because I covered Great White Buffalo on one of my records, and I just wanted. That's, I mean, I'm embarrassed because it's really hard to get that the way he does it. Ted still rules on that one, but I heard he done that, so I thought, I mean, we all do that as guitar players. We all like our heroes, and when we go like, oh man, Randy Rhoads had the MXR Distortion Plus, so I got to get one of those, and and then you get it, and you don't sound like Randy still, but
but it's kind of like, it's nostalgic too. Like when you get something, oftentimes those, not every time, but a lot of times you get those pieces of your hero's rig, and you just find a different way to use it. You get to, it amplifies you, right? Yeah. And the part of you that loves Randy Rhoads, you could break that out and kind of do that thing. And I feel the same. It's interesting because I definitely got hooked on doing like more like a stiffer pick for a long time. And I even got working at Dunlop for all these years. We even made the Flow 420, which is this 4.2 super beveled like thing with a big grip, and it's super, it's super slick, right? But as you get faster on the strings, you lose that rasp, you lose the type of thing. And the lighter picks, because they kind of, like you're saying, there's a certain thing, because they're thinner, and they make more noise on the string. And so Misha Mansour one day came over and was like, hey, you're still playing all these thick picks? He's like, oh, I'm playing a 0.60, 0.60. And he's like, here, try this one. And I'm like, wait, you're doing all this super chunk, like gent stuff with this little pick? And I was like, all right, man. And he left it. And so, it shifted me in another direction because of that. Like, I was like, okay, now I've settled back on a 73, but Tortex. But I could, it's incredible. I'm impressed with you that like the 0.50 is like the only thing that's like thinner than that I have is like a Justin Timberlake nylon, which is like a 0.42 or something. And it's just like, you can like bend its thing in half. Like, it's like, maybe I should send you some of these, because you might actually like them.
It's a little, what do you call it? A shot.
Yeah, it's that's really cool. And so you got like these really thin strings but high action, and then a really thin pick that allows you,
and having an amp that's nearby.
Yeah, that's the big deal.
And studio monitors aren't the same.
Correct, right? Because they don't have this. There's not the same. They're just not doing the same thing. The speakers are not built for the same thing.
Well, and there's also this stuff going on. Your drums are in the studio monitors, and I'm selfish. Oh. I want one, at least one speaker that's all mine. Nobody else gets loud on my speaker.
Rightfully so. Were you on the Tortex by the time that you were doing the drill? What was that, Daddy Brother Lover?
With the drill stuff, that started with Racer X. And the thing I realized quickly is that actually that's another thing with thin picks. With the drill, it's a machine, so it's really helpful to have thin picks for that, because otherwise it just just hits the string too hard and it gets really ugly. So it's that's definitely the thin picks work best on the drill. I said the innovation they made with the drill since the early Racer X days was, in the Racer X I used 3 picks on the drill, and not realizing you can just as easily put 4 on there, and it makes it faster, because you know, for every rotation you get 1 more hit. So it's significantly, you know, you get a lot more.
It's 1 more.
On a Christmas album, I used it on 1 song. Winter Wonderland has some drill in the end.
Oh, cool. All right, I'll listen for that. I didn't hear that. That's awesome. Yeah, so well, that's amazing to hear your journey around that too, because I know that, like, you know, you're really known for this lightning fast, like, right hand technique, and at an early point, like I was curious, like, I'm like, who, I know you were coming out around the same time as Yngwie and stuff, like, you guys, I mean, you were inspired by him stuff, but like, I'm like, who else could have like inspired you to like rip as hard as you did in the early days? Like, what was there any one person that kind of made you kind of want to go for that?
I mean, Van Halen for sure. Although the Van Halen had a really beautiful combination of, you know, there'd be some hammer-ons and pull-offs thrown in there, which really adds to me a vocalish quality. When you speak, it's not all vowels and it's not all consonants. And the consonants have a percussive, you know, the letter K, letter T, letter P, they have this percussive element to them, but vowels are this more soft, smooth thing. And if you only have one and not the other, it can become a little monotonous. And so to me, the way Van Halen played, where he'd have a snarly, you know, and the other thing is, like, technically, having a hammer-on or pull-off gives you enough recovery time with your pick where you can set up to have a little more control over the tone. I find that almost anything where I have to pick everything, I have to like physically tighten up and be a little more careful. And I lose the ability to control the tone as much. It ends up being much more like, how can I preserve a certain level of sameness? Like making everything, I want everything to be very much the same. And sometimes that's what the music calls for. I mean, there's not like one dynamic that works for everything. But in general, having contrasts gives you emotion. That, you know, to me, the emotions come from contrast, coming from quiet and loud. And that, if it's just only one, it sort of gets flat. So that's why, you know, I love the Van Halen stuff. Was, you know, he wasn't picking everything, and actually Yngwie isn't either. I mean, there's a lot of stuff, you know, there's certain riffs where he will, and he does the descending 4s on 1 string, or the I can't do them as quick as he does, but the Yngwie look I can do is that that's all picking, and it works because it's on 1 string. Because whenever you go to the next string, that's hard. You know, that's like a real wrench in the gears. And you can sort of do it, but it's hard. So the thing with Yngwie, like I you know, sometimes I'll figure out Yngwie stuff for my students, or I figure it out myself. There's that phrase he plays. I forget. You know, it's got like a sort of a title that sounds like a classical title. You know, it's like Trilogy Part 1. It's like, and he starts it off with you know, Paganini inspired. Bang, bang. You know, it's you know, it's Phrygian dominant. Whatever it is, I don't know. I used to know it, but I you know, these days with the computer, you can slow stuff down really easily. So I put that in the computer because I was like, oh, I want to hear what it sounds like when Yngwie picks every note. You slow that thing down, and you can tell like a lot of it's picked, but a lot of it isn't. You know, and you know, to me, Yngwie is one of my favorite pickers, and it was sort of heartening to know that you know, he plays it the way I would. Like that you know. You pick everything when it works and when it sounds good, but there's no like arbitrary law like, oh, if everything is picked, it's like morally superior than if it's not, you know. And you know, that mindset really can screw people up, because a lot of stuff really gets tangled up quick if you try to pick every note, and the hammer-ons and pull-offs, especially if you're using distortion, because then they're just as loud. If you're Al Di Meola and you're playing like acoustic, then it kind of makes sense, because you've got to. You know, then the dynamic, an acoustic guitar is so much more dynamic that if a hammer-on pull-off is so quiet compared to a pick note, that then okay, that's a problem. But with distortion, it's not. The hammer and pull off just as loud. It's just a different tone. And sometimes having that different tone is really a better choice.
That's a cool way to look at it. I was actually going to say in my early first few lessons, I remember my guitar teacher showing me Al Di Meola, and he's like, this guy, he's one of the bosses of the world because he picks every note. Like, and he was just like, this is just a different way. He's like, it's not the right way, but this is a different way of doing it. Like everybody's way is like different, but you could learn something from watching and kind of studying the way that he uses, and he has dynamic even still, like.
Well, and the thing is, like when Al plays like that, he's making choices. He's very intentionally choosing phrases that work when you pick everything. Because not everything does. It's like not every screw is a Phillips head.
Sure.
So if you have a Phillips head screwdriver, look for the Phillips head screws, and it's going to work. But don't put it in a flathead because it's not going to work. The same thing. Like there's certain phrases where it's like that's the wrong tool for the job. And an example would be I remember learning "Point of No Return," the Kansas song, and it's got that with it. Let me play that a little better. And that's a line that's played on organ and violin, and it's triads. And I'm playing it like Leonard Skinner, like with like Freebird kind of technique, but I just stretch it out. And it's easy and it sounds good, but because it's triads, my first thought was like, well, if I play a triad, that's an arpeggio. An arpeggio, that should be sweep picking. So I found the same notes. And sweep picking is just a tangle, and it's not because sweep picking is bad. It's because if you sweep pick, it tends to be like really good, fast in one direction. It's great for that. That's fine. But if you got to go, because the Kansas thing, it changes direction real fast. It's got twists and turns, and got my pick on the floor. So that's going to be so much cleaner than sweep picking is great for places where sweep picking works. And hammer-ons and pull-offs, your Leonard Skinner techniques are great for where that works. So that when any player gets sort of fixated on like, okay, this is going to be my technique for everything, it's like, well, that'll work as long as you only pick the phrases that work with that technique, but you're going to be really walling yourself in musically, to that sound. And again, that's not always a bad idea. That can be actually a great idea. So it is making limitation and going like, okay, well, there's still plenty to do. Picasso had his blue period. It's like, okay, only blue. Right. What can I do with that? That's with Al Di Meola, it's like, okay, I'm going to pick everything, and what can I do with that? If I just sort of put those limitations, but it is a limitation, and if a lot of my exploring will be. I do that too. There's definitely places where I go like, I'm not going to go there because it's just too hard for me. It doesn't feel right, or I'm not into the sound. Like if somebody like watching a player like Tommy Emmanuel. I watched him play, and I was like, you know what? I'm going to get a thumb pick. I put it on. It was like I played about 2 notes and went like, I'll just let Tommy Emmanuel do it.
I think I did the exact same thing.
Yeah.
I mean, I've hung out with a few different thumb pick players, and I'm like, oh man, that's so cool. I'm so inspired right now. I'm gonna go, and I oh nope. Pick up the other pick. I'll go back to my old ways.
Yeah. So that's I think every player sort of makes those choices about like, what battles can I win? What battles can I win in the future? And what battles do I know I'm just going to always lose and stay away from those?
I like that you bring up this because you inadvertently kind of brought up the concept of limitations and setting boundaries for your creativity, right? And we could just argue, or talk about how Al Di Meola kind of boxed himself in on one hand, but also created his own sound and genre on the other, right? Like if you stay within the confines or a boundary of something, you end up kind of creating a flavor, right? Like
yeah, you go deep with it.
Yeah.
I mean, you sort of plot out, this is my real estate, and I'm going to dig a hole deeper than anybody, or build a skyscraper bigger than anybody, and and do it my way. So that's and it's funny. Like one of the first interviews I ever did, when like Mr. Big came out, I started making a name for myself. I remember it was with someone who English wasn't their first language, so the way they said the question wasn't as delicate as it might have been. But they said, like, why is it that you have no style? and they didn't seem to say it with, they didn't have like a nasty expression on their face. They didn't seem like they were accusing me of anything bad. But that's a hard, I thought, well, do they really mean that I have no style? And it became a joke. I would laugh with my guitar tech and be like, well, you may have no style, but you're one of the best of the no style guitar players. And I think it might be partially because of that, because I really loved heavy metal, but I also love pop music. I also love elements of jazz and fusion and blues and country and I'm willing. There are places that I might not go, but I'm probably spread a little more thin than some other players would be, and so it sort of takes a little longer for me to find something that is like mine, because my influences are so varied and there's so many of them. It's I think my gestation period's a little longer. That's my excuse.
Hey man, better late than never. You're good. and hey, one would say that after looking at a body of work such as you have, like, I mean, there's lots of themes and lots of reoccurring things, and you have a style. I mean, over and over again throughout this podcast, I've had almost 100 episodes, and I've had multiple people say, "Oh, well, like Paul Gilbert style, like I would do this," and I'm like, "Oh, okay." So I've heard that statement a bunch of times from really great players that came up on your stuff, and so. I think it's a hilarious moment, obviously to recount, like why you have no style, but like, and I was thinking of the reductionist or the boundary approach, kind of like in the way, you think about albums, like for a great example is your latest album. You're like, I'm only doing Christmas songs.
Yeah.
That's a boundary, right? Like, and you have to work out within that. And I find that oftentimes, at least a boundary or a limitation or two that is, self-imposed is some of the greatest things that you can do for yourself in that way. So that you're like, you already have answers to a bunch of questions when you do that. You're like, oh, that definitely not doing that. It doesn't fit, doesn't work. Okay, cool. Next. And you can get to the meat of the thing sometimes and stay the course a little better when you have the guides on, so to speak.
Yeah, you're not distracted by too many decisions to make or too many things that you feel you should be doing. To me, the harpsichord is always a great thing to look at for limitations, because you can't do vibrato, and there's no dynamics. No matter how soft or how hard you hit the key, it comes out the same. It's just the way mechanically the instrument works. It's like a trigger, with no dynamics. So that's what you got. And harpsichord's a beautiful instrument. I mean, you listen to a Bach invention played on a harpsichord, it's incredible. But you're going to find the creativity in like, the harpsichord stuff tends to be fast, because you can rip on a harpsichord, and but you're not going to find like, that's not going to work on a harpsichord. But you have like, that's just one hand. The other hand's ripping along too, and that works for the instrument. And so it's funny, like some of the guitar players that I hear now, because that era I come through from, like 70s rock, everybody had killing vibrato. I was watching today an old Thin Lizzy video, and Scott Gorham in the 70s like he was just like run of the mill, great, good guitar player, but nothing special. Just like your average pro rock guitar player, does the job. Not Eddie Van Halen, but he's playing exactly the way you want him to play. And I was watching a video, and he is doing stuff that I tried to teach my students for years. Like he's got the perfect low string hand position. Like I spend so much time trying to get to my students to do what Scott Gorham just does without thinking about it. And he wasn't one of the shiny ones, I mean, when you think about like the people that really stuck out, you got like Michael Schenker, the flashy people, Uli Roth, Van Halen, Gary Moore, those are kind of the people we still remember. And but even like the sort of the working man guitar player still had the important stuff. And because that's what I grew up with. That's kind of like that's important element to me. And then I'll watch modern guitar players who just either don't have any vibrato, and maybe they don't need it. The style they're playing that doesn't have that element. But my first thought is like, here's a harpsichord. It's easier. It's so much easier to play. If you don't need vibrato, why play the guitar? Go get a harpsichord. You'll be faster. You'll be cleaner. You'll have better tone. Like, why bother with this thing? This is for bending. If you want to play guitar, but at the same time, I don't really take advantage of what the instrument will do in terms of like finger picking. Like you see a player like Chet Atkins or Tommy Emmanuel. To me, it's like those guys are guitar players. Correct. They're like, okay, it's got 6 strings. Let me use that. Like I'm sort of a 1-string player that has 6 strings. And they are Chet Atkins and Tommy Emmanuel, they're 6-string players. They're going like, okay, I'm going to use all 6 of them at once, and have like multiple stuff going on. And I see that like when those guys are really guitar players, they're doing stuff that is like really guitarish, where I'm playing more like Hendrix style, where it's a little more like what a singer would do, but it happens to be on guitar, and once in a while I'll throw in a chord.
Man, that's a cool insight into thinking about like the dynamic and just thinking about the instrument itself, because I think it's probably why a lot of us are drawn to it, is because it's such the potential for expression on the guitar is high, right? Like especially if you got a whammy. I know you don't rock the whammy bar, but like if you're, or maybe you have a few somewhere you do. Ooh, look at you! You do, of course. Oh yeah, that's a Roadstar. It looks like, huh?
It is. It's a 1983.
Oh, yeah. Those are great guitars.
Yeah, it's killer. So I'm trying to think of my favorite whammy lick. Well, I wrote a song that's like has the dumbest whammy lick on purpose because I love dumb whammy licks. It's a song called "Enemies in Jail," but
cool.
Just to go whoa. That's what it's for.
Yeah, it's so expressive. And I mean, like guys like Van Halen and Vi and people that have really popularized, even abused that scenario. But it has been really like, matter of fact, Vi was probably I heard Van Halen first for sure, but then it was before like a guitar playing was like in my lexicon. I was just thinking, oh, rock star, like that's cool. He makes cool noises with his guitar. Yeah. But then it was when Vi came along, it was like, oh shit, like this is a totally different thing. And it's almost like it's a voice and in this different kind of way. So yeah, I don't know. I guess just the expression level of it is super enthralling, because as you were kind of going through the consonants and the vowels and like the difference in how we use our language with our voice, and then try to transfer expression and transfer communication into our hands, into our the melodic choices at our fingertips. I just find it to be endlessly magical, right? So like for somebody that didn't want to do any vibrato or didn't want to do a whammy bar, it does beg the question, are you on the right instrument? Maybe I don't know.
Well, yeah. I mean, the harp, you don't see the harpsichord that much, but if you'd like, type harpsichord into YouTube and see some of the players, and if the thing, like I think the thing with shred guitar that appeals is that percussive, like super fast. Check out the harpsichord. It's ripping.
Okay.
The other one that's ripping is the clarinet. I was curious about Artie Shaw because because Eddie Van Halen's dad was a jazz clarinet player.
Oh.
And that's Eddie and Alice grew up listening to their dad practice clarinet every day, and I thought that had to inform their musical sensibility. The same thing, Pete Townshend's dad, a jazz clarinet player, and so I thought, well, what I should research this. So I went back and Artie Shaw was like the Yngwie of the clarinet in his day, except he was a lot more. I mean, he was dating all the hot actresses.
Really?
Artie Shaw was, and if you and he's playing kind of conservative melodies, but at the end of the song, he goes like, and it's like, it sounds like Yngwie's most terrifying sweeps, but maybe even a couple degrees cleaner and faster, and it's just like ripping clarinet. I'm like, what's going on with Artie Shaw? This is killing. And
wow.
So I thought that's and of course I love when Yngwie does arpeggios too. Listen to Far Beyond the Sun, it's just amazing. But it's that's the fun thing about research. You find that stuff and you just go, that's pretty cool.
So cool. It's cool to hear just that. I love hearing about the great guitar players also, like growing up in musical environments and kind of knowing what was around, what they were around at an early age, knowing that like Dimebag's dad like had a studio and did a bunch of sessions and played and like was just immersed in it, and then you're like, and you fast forward and go, oh, that's why he's from Texas, grew up around all these guys, there's all these bars, there's all the scene that he was immersed in, and then he just walked out into, it's not like he didn't have to do the work. Everybody has to do the work for themselves, but there's always this possibility. I mean, he could have went off and did something completely different, but instead he graced the stage with his brother and made a legacy, and did a different thing and created a sound that we hadn't quite heard before.
Yeah.
So that's awesome. I'm gonna take a look real quick here. There's a couple of questions. I asked the people, I said, hey, is there any burning questions for Paul? And let's see. So ask him how he transcribed his classical pieces for guitar so beautifully, aka Gilberto concerto.
That one, I've got the score. Within arm's reach.
Oh, look at that.
J.C. Bach harpsichord concerto in A. Not an easy score to find. And there it is. So it's the reason I mean, I'm not a reader. I'm not a fluent reader at all. But with a concerto, you've got an orchestra, you've got a lot of different instruments, and there was too much going on for me to get it by ear. Because I can hear the main parts, but to hear like the whole, what the oboe's doing, it's too much for me to separate out the parts. It's a lot more going on than like one guitar, one bass, and a singer and a drummer. That I might be able to sort out, but a whole orchestra is a little bit much to ask by ear. So I found the score, and I hired a keyboard player who could read, and I had them come to the studio, and I said, we're going to do whatever I can memorize in chunks, and we'll start, and we did the backing first. So we'll start with the low cello, whatever that is, and most of the parts are not technically challenging, because the song is like so my tone down. That's the general thing. So behind it, it's going like. Sort of thing, which is hard to remember because every the oboe might be doing that, but that might be the cello part, but then the viola is like similar but a little different, and it's just too hard to remember all that. So we'd go through piece by piece, as much as I could stuff in my brain, and I'd perform it, double track it, and then dump it out of my brain, and then go to the next 8 bars or whatever, and then just assemble the whole backing that way. And I had already learned because the way it's a concerto, so the orchestra kind of pulls back dynamically while the harpsichord does the solo, and those I could mostly work out by ear, because I think it's before computers, but I had a little Ibanez like cassette slow down machine, and I knew those. I needed time to practice, so I'd worked out those, and then that was it. I just put it together with an engineer and the piano player that could read.
That's so cool. I appreciate you giving some insight on that. I don't know if, hopefully this is a real question. If Snakebite sent him another scalding email, would he go back to shredding?
Yeah, that was great. It was like what do you call it? A troll.
Okay. That's one of my friends.
Snakebite was this guy in Australia, and he just ripped me apart in this letter. I had released my first solo album, King of Clubs. It was like kind of pop record. And he's like, "What the hell is this? The worst thing I ever heard. It's horrible." And I expected, shred, and I didn't get it. I'm dissatisfied. Just complaining. And I just thought, maybe he's right. So I ended up putting Razorback back together, doing some heavy metal albums. And I think maybe I'm already on my way, because I was figuring out some TNT yesterday. You remember the song 10,000 Lovers?
Yeah.
An extra fuzz pedal. A vocal line, so I never wanted to settle down. What was that? I can get it better, but the
coming along.
Trying to get Ronnie Rutenko's guitar sound and that song is so heavy and chunky. I don't, I've been so into blues lately that I haven't really been trying to get like the low chunk, but sure. For some reason I've been into TNT lately. I've been listening to all the first 3 or 4 records and really digging it, especially also for the vocals, because Tony Harnell's so killer, and try to get some of those vocals on my guitar, and the notes are there. You try to sing that stuff, and good luck. but the notes actually are on the guitar.
So he said, all right. So John Matos, he says, just ask how.
Just what?
How does Paul Gilbert, how? He's just ask how. Silly question.
How?
He's like,
it's a general question. Well, I suppose the general question have a general answer, but I can't. The general answer is not coming to me, so I'm going to have to just take a guess or my own feeling of what how is. Besides Greg Howe, who's awesome. Yeah, that's a good question, but it's going to take me a second to narrow it down. I would say with by using the part of your brain that listens, and that's not the final answer. That's my current answer. I asked a question once to Nathan East, who's the bass player for Eric Clapton,
Phenomenal.
I did like a jam session with him. And I said, what's it like playing with Eric Clapton? And he said, it's like playing with one giant heart.
Hmm.
And that to me is like the next step, because I think when I started, I played by ear, and I think after playing guitar for a while, I played by hand, like my fingers were kind of leading where I was going. And I think I've sort of gotten back into playing by ear. And I think I think eventually the ultimate path is to play by heart. And actually on this Christmas record, I may have gotten there a couple of times, because the first time in my life I made myself cry, which
Wow.
it sounds silly, but when I was doing this song "Let It Snow," the end of it, the whole band came down. It's just a guitar player playing some beautiful chords, and I just played the melody, and I hit that last note, and along with the note is a minor 7 flat 5 chord. And there he hit a. Oh, I'm sorry. Over a B major 7th with E in the bass. And it was all stuff that I had heard intentionally. I didn't put that together with math. That was all sounds that like I heard in my head. And it just came together perfectly. And when I hit that, just like fucking fuck, it was felt so good. Excuse me, you can beep that out.
No, it's okay.
But I started tears coming out of my eyes just from playing 3 notes, and then just having it be perfect. And that happened a couple of times. And the funny thing, the other time it happened was when I was covering a Barbra Streisand performance, because we did what was the song? "Have Yourself a Merry Little Christmas." And at the end of it, I'm playing the melody and just going like, man, this is, my eyes are just, a water machine. So then that's never happened in my life. So that was really a point that not even something I had tried for. It's just, I'm just playing what I'm interested in. But that was a wonderful musical experience, and something that other musicians have given to me. I've definitely gone to see concerts where, Yngwie, I've cried at Yngwie shows. I've cried seeing AC/DC when the bass player, is on A for about a minute and a half, and man, when he hits the D, the tension. I'm totally serious. When the way the band builds it, when the D is so important, it's such a big change, and they've just had everything set up so when it hits the D, it's the most meaningful D you've ever heard in your life. And and of course, seeing Todd Rundgren and Paul McCartney, the pop singers like that does it too. So that's, I've experienced that through other players, but having it actually happening within myself, that was, with the help of the band,
Sure.
that was really an accomplishment.
What a great answer, Paul. Thank you for I love how you rolled into the emotion of what music does for you, and how you've recently contacted that place for yourself. And but the answer of like eventually evolving to play, as you said, play from the heart, play by the heart. How did you say it? Was it
well the way Nathan East said it was Eric Clapton is a heart.
Is one big heart.
He's just one giant heart.
Yeah. But playing from the intellect, playing from your mind, playing from your listening, playing from your hands, and then playing from as your heart, and in that place. And that when that kind of all coalesces and comes together, that as a spectator, it causes a wave of emotion. And then occasionally as a performer, we too also get to partake in that.
Yeah.
And hearing about this, it's happened a couple times for myself on stage with the band years ago. Like we were on tour, and just like 5th night in the row, and you just step on stage, you don't even know where you're at. And I just like, and we just automatically know what's going on because we're already warmed up and it's the thing. And then like halfway through the set, I kind of look over at my guys and I'm just like, I start crying because I'm like, this is the best thing that's ever happened.
Yeah.
Like I don't like, it doesn't even matter if I get any of these notes right from here on out. Like this happened. And it kind of took me by surprise. And then, you know, every once in a while, it's usually in a writing process, like that I'll be sitting here and then I'm like, and something comes out and I don't expect it quite like that. And I'm like, oh, you know, and then it causes a wave of some kind. And I think that maybe you opened up or gave me the skeleton key as to what, because I had written down here, just like, you know, Paul, you know, different notes and stuff. And I said, you know, I mean, you seem to have a lighthearted approach to life and to how you tend to communicate. And it seems to like flow into your music and like you have fun. You seem to be actually genuinely having fun because you're playing. Like, it doesn't seem like, I know that you work, but you know, so I don't know, this hearing about you emoting and crying at other people's, you know, heart wrenching thing. I think that's what kind of, you just connected it for me that like, oh, maybe that's the thing, like that you feel it on that level. Thank you for sharing. That's amazing.
Thank you as well. That's the thing. Interviews are like free therapy.
It is.
Or maybe during the lockdown, just talking to a human being instead of, you know, typing is like, oh my goodness, it's a human. Woohoo!
I mean, most of this podcast has basically been that for me. I mean, almost 100 episodes, and I'm like, hey, I don't know what else to do with myself. I'm stuck indoors and like I'm playing guitar. Like, would somebody talk to me, please? God, let's talk about guitar stuff because like you're all so far away from me, you know. That's amazing. So I want to shift gears one more time, or maybe two more times, and then I'll let you go. But I have written down here that I heard that you taught Buckethead for a while, like, and so you must be one of the few people that know his true identity, and you're also partially responsible for that really amazing monster of a player. Can you give me any insight as to like what it was like to work with him on that?
Yeah, well, we were both really young. Like I think I had just turned 18, and he was probably about 15, and his mom used to drive him. You know, I think he lived in Bakersfield or something. I don't remember, but I just remember, you know, he say, yeah, it was a bit of a drive. And, you know, this is my apartment in Hollywood. I don't even remember how he found, I don't remember how anybody found me, you know, because it was before the days of the internet. But he'd come over to take lessons. And at that time, I was really into scales because I had gone to GIT and I had learned diatonic harmony and how you could take a major scale and you know, start it on every step of the scale and make a shape. And I really like the 3-note per string ones because I had a lick that worked for that. And you know, I could go you know, like at every step. And I'd never been a picker before, so I was just excited that, man, I can pick something. I can't believe it. And so that was kind of, I was in that world, and I would just show everybody that. And I think that the Buckethead was he really dug it. He was good at it. And he had interesting thing is, like, you know, I'm labeled probably correctly as a fast player, but in terms of like my actual physical, like, will my finger move faster than another person, I've never had, because I've seen players that have like this little flicker. They're like, especially with the thumb, this little, and I've never been able to do that. Like I've never felt like I'm like a hummingbird kind of person. Like I'm a big person. You know, if anything, I'm a little slower just because physically I have more to move around. And so, you know, any speed that I have comes more from like a balance of the two hands rather than like one part that can just go, you know, by itself a million miles an hour. Like I kind of need to balance the work amongst the things. Like, you work a little bit, I'm tired, now you do it, you know. So that's how I tend to get things done. But Buckethead really did have this little, I don't know if flicker is the right word, a little twitch, maybe is a better word, in a good way. Like, you know, this thing, and I'm like, man, that's, you know, I can't do that, you know. So I've seen that across the years, and in certain players, they just have this thing where they're one part of their body will really get cooking in a way that I can't. It doesn't feel like mine will do that. So that was impressive, and it was like me. We're both kind of nerdy. We're just into the music, and not much else. So I think that's. I think I saw a thing later where he did it. There was an animation where he comes over to my house and like my TV's on fire and I'm just like playing. It was perfect, and it's a great way to have great blunders in every other aspect of your life. But it does work for getting some skill down on an instrument.
Yeah, he's I saw him live one time. I've seen a lot of videos and stuff because I'm a fan. I just dig all the eccentricity, and like just where he's coming from. He's like coming from a different place, and then he like goes into alien freaking I don't know what mode, with all the tapping and it's just phenomenal. And then I love his soft side too, his softer albums, Colma, and there's another one I can't think of at the moment, but maybe Electric Dreams or something like that. But really, those inspired me in a really big way too. And he came through Seattle when I was living there, and it was a tiny little place called the Chop Suey up on the Capitol Hill, and he packed that place out, and he had this stretchy guitar strap. Mm-hmm. And so like, and he's already tall and lanky and kind of moves in these like funky ways, and he was just doing this thing, and it's the first time I had really seen him, and I was right in the front row, and the whole time I felt like he never missed a beat. I never missed a note, and I don't know, it was just so entertaining. And then for his encore, came out and did like a Jimi Hendrix, where he did 3 or 4 songs in one medley. Yeah, medley. Did a Jimi Hendrix medley and did maybe a Zeppelin medley, but just no lyrics or anything. And Brain was on drums. It was insane. And he came out and gave us toys. Like he had like a box of toys and like gave us toys. And I know that's probably a thing that he does, and like maybe I'm just like kind of like, oh, it feels novel to me, but I'll never forget. Like I'm like, that's an original dude right there. Like that's a thing, like nobody's doing this. Yeah. And for whether you dig it or not, like I'm such a fan of originality. When somebody says, it's cool, everybody's doing it that way. Like I'm just not gonna. And I feel similar about you in a lot of ways, like with your guitar choices and like just kind of how you have a lighthearted approach. Like, oh, that's cool. Like, can you flip the guitar upside down and do the thing different? Because me, and here you are, shredding it up, doing the thing in a really unique way. So thanks for helping put Buckethead, on the right trajectory. That's cool as hell.
And I can probably credit my own, my own trajectory to just not having good fortune genetically with hair. So I suspect that if I could have maintained, like John Sykes hair, that I would be in Whitesnake right now, and just keeping that gig, and no one would ever know I had a sense of humor. And I would just be like, just playing Whitesnake songs all day long, being totally content, but I sort of, it's almost like to make up for, wake up in the morning and just go like, this is not what I wanted. I wanted to look like Paul Stanley, and or Robin Zander, and how did this happen? And I go like, well, I better make up for it. What can I do that's on my instrument that'll what someone will listen to, including me.
So you're saying that your who you ended up being is somehow this kind of self-imposed boundary, right? It's like a limitation that you had to work around, and so within that limitation, you're over here being creative about it.
Yeah, it's a little bit, having this job. It's when I was a kid and going to the guidance counselor in high school. Well, Paul, what are your plans for after high school? And they're like, oh, I'm going to be a rock and roll guitar player. And like, well, do you have something to fall back on? I think any musician, in the back and maybe the front of their mind knows, like, how did I ever get this job? This is amazing. I can't believe that people will hire me to do something that's so much fun, and I get to do it all the time. This is unbelievable. So I really want to keep the job. And there's a lot of competition. There'll be people that and I'm glad, because I love to listen to music. I'm a fan, so I'm hoping there's I don't necessarily see it as competition. There's like just more cool people to listen to. But at the same time, in order to keep my job, I just think, like, I got to do something that's interesting, so people don't change the channel. I have to whatever tools I have. I don't have the big hair tool anymore. I can't use that one. Oh well. So, what else do I got? It's just sort of a desperate hunt for entertainment.
Well, I dig it. I think you're doing a great job. And I thank you for playing a little bit of Whitesnake, because that's like my favorite album of all time, is that self-titled. I mean, I still go back to that album and I'm just like, that was just one of those gems that, like, every track, the production, every solo, the drum, everything about it, I love. There's nothing I don't like about that album. And so, yeah, it would be interesting if you were, that character doing that thing out there, but I'm glad you're doing this thing.
One thing I'll say is, like, Eddie Van Halen to me was such a hero, such an inspiration, but at a certain point he just sort of stopped making music.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the fact that my career has been like mid-level success, at best, has been really useful in not stopping making music. I suspect that if you're Eddie Van Halen and you have yourself to compete with, every record you do is competing with the first Van Halen album. And everybody who listens to your stuff is going to compare it to everything you did, and the things that you did are so monumental and so awesome. I'm competing with, like, stuff that's okay, but when I get up to bat and hit the ball again, I have a genuine belief that I might be able to top what I did before, and so that's the advantage of not having this a really like a legacy that is so strong, and that actually takes your inspiration away, because it's scary,
or an interesting way to see it.
Yeah, and so that's how I rationalize having a struggling career. Is like, that's the good part of it, is I have no fear of going out and doing it again, because it's you ever see Ed Wood, the movie with Johnny Depp?
Oh yeah.
He turns in his movie and he goes up to get the review from the movie studio, and the big important guy sitting behind the desk, and the Johnny Depp Ed Wood character goes, "Well, how'd you like it?" And the guy goes, "It's the worst thing I've ever seen. It's horrible. I can't believe that a movie could be this bad." And the Ed Wood character goes, "The next one will be better." And that's often how I feel. Like, I mean, over the years, I've certainly been proud of some of the things I've done. I like it, but I always feel like the next one will be better.
I hear what you're saying is, in a way, it's like it's almost like you get cursed with when you hit the absolute peak of the mountaintop, right? Like, and everybody is just like, yo, like, because like you said, EVH is the perfect example. Like, because still to this day, everybody will say, like, well, Eddie changed my life, for all these reasons. And everybody holds him accountable to, like, the initial first couple of things that they knew him about or knew of him. And I can see that probably producing some level of anxiety, depression, like any of the things, like, to try to, like, overcome fear. Like, yeah.
And again, I don't know John Sykes, but, having made that Whitesnake album, you get out of bed and go, like, okay, but should I do a new record? Like, no, I'm just going to let everybody keep listening to that one.
Yeah, that's a real thought that I could see him thinking, because I'm like, hey, I already did it. I go back in 1988 or whatever it was,
Like Michael Phelps, like, am I going to be in another Olympics? Man, I did it.
And smoking weed too at the same time. How you like that? I love that you also, it's kind of self-admitted that you're still very much a listener of music, and you really enjoy hearing other people. You're not in competition with people. And so in knowing that, I would love to hear, like, what are a couple of records or a couple albums that you've been listening to in the recent days or months or a year, or something that you might think that some of the listeners might be, interested to check out, especially if it's something we don't know a lot about.
Well, let's see. Well, a lot of TNT this week. Let me look on my Spotify and see what I've been listening to. Let's see. Oh, you know what? I'm gonna tell you one song that I'm sure nobody's heard, and they've got to listen to it. Pat Travers. You might have heard of Pat Travers. He had a couple of hits.
Yeah.
But he had an album called Radioactive, which did not, nobody bought it except for me. And it has a song on it called it's called "I Can Love You." And Pat's not even playing guitar on it. He's playing organ and keyboards. Pat Thrall's playing guitar. Tommy Aldridge on drums. Mars Cowling on bass. And it's like a heavy pop song, but it's so good. It's I get chills just thinking about it. And it's nostalgia for me, because I loved that record when I was 13 years old. But I hope you guys will check that out. I Can Love You by Pat Travers on the Radioactive record. Crank it up, and it's just heavy. I mean, it's a simple song. It's just and you have to wait. You have to wait to the very end to hear the guitar. So although Pat Thrall's rhythm playing is so cool, and it's just simple. Like I think it's just simple. Easy. I think that it's amusing that all the winners. Anyway, the killer song. And Pat's playing that. All these kind of cool, like, it's like the obla-di obla-da, like, but doing with all this distortion and amazing tone. And at the end, he's doing all that killer bends, and it's just got everything I like in it. It's a great combination of like of genuine pop with super heavy band and guys that can really play, and probably a live performance. I love that one, obviously. Let's see. It's on Spotify. I've been listening to. Oh, well, this one I don't even know it yet, but I discovered there's a Buck Owens album it's Buck Owens in Japan, and he was the guy on Hee Haw, and it's like the Everly Brothers, because he had a guy who sang with him. I mean, of course, on Hee Haw it was Roy Clark, but in his own band, he had like a second guitar player, and they sang 2-part harmonies all the time. And there's also an Everly Brothers album called like the Everlys. I forget the title. The Everlys Go Country or something like that. And they're singing all country songs. And in a way, those, like, the Everlys are from a pop background, and they go country, and Buck Owens is country, but he kind of has this pop element with the harmonies. And I love both of it. Just the sound of two strong voices harmonizing. I mean, the Beatles did that a lot. Like, when we hear Lennon McCartney have a real, like on Babies in Black, how long will it take? And then, Lennon's got the other part. It was funny. Like, Andy Timmons and I did a jam. He came to my last show I did in Texas, and I brought him up on stage, and We Can Work It Out, the Beatles song. And we did it all instrumental. And I can't remember who was Paul and who was John, but we kind of picked, and we played the vocal lines. And the best part was the slow, like, the life is very short, but there's no time for fussing and thinking. Because we did it all on guitar. And I think I had the high part. I was doing a slide. And then, Andy was doing the harmony below it. And, that's compared to what, usually you put the two of us on stage and we're going to be going, okay, you go, and I'll go, and, have the shred jam. but to have those where we're both just aiming at that harmony, we're both, we both love the Beatles, and that was like one of the best guitar jams I've ever had in my life. Just that bridge. It was so great.
Such a good chord progression, such a good song in general. I mean, it's funny because I do remember it as a Beatles song, but like when I was coming of age and like junior high, Tesla had redone it on their, I think it was their 5-man acoustical jam or something like that, and that's how I remember it as a Tesla song, and they had done it with acoustic and like live thing. That's cool. Did you guys record that with you and Andy?
There might be a version on YouTube. I think somebody had a phone, but
yeah, everybody's got a phone. Yeah.
But anyway, I think I gotta go. I gotta go have lunch, and I've got another. I got afternoon interviews too.
Perfect timing. Thank you so much for everything. I appreciate you so much, Paul. And I hope you have the best day ever. And I hope the next interview goes well.
Right on. Let's just see what I got. I've got the. It's Vortex. Yeah. It's the Pi baby.
Wow. I love it, man. That is so awesome.
Pi video. All right. Thanks so much. Have a good one.
Take care, brother.
Bye-bye.
Players Pick Podcast, Picks and Perspective with Chrys Johnson.